Hello and welcome to ServiceNerd. In today's video, we'll be looking at how we can call a flow from a script. Hello again and welcome back. So in today's video, we're going to answer the question, when is a flow not a flow? And that sounds like a really bad joke, right? But stay with me here, there is some method in the madness. So in ServiceNow, we know we can create a flow, right? Using Flow Designer, low code stuff. But there are instances and there is a capability where you can invoke a flow using a script. Well, in fact, you can invoke a flow, a subflow, or an action using a script. So today we're going to look at how you can do that. So I'm going to show you in Flow where we can get that script and how we can use it. And we're going to talk about some of the examples of why we might do that. But before we get started, and if you are new around here and haven't yet subscribed, please go ahead, consider subscribing, smash the bell icon, and you'll get notified whenever I upload a new video just like this one. Okay, enough waffle, let's get cracking. So let's just explain a little bit more. So ServiceNow being ServiceNow has given us some APIs that we as devs or admins can access, right? And they've got different methods in which we can access from a script. So we can access APIs from server side or client side. So if we look at the server side, we've got something called FlowAPI, which contains different methods in which we can play with from a script. And we've also got ScriptableFlowRunner, which is, I'm going to say the new version, but I'll explain that on the next slide for you. And I said we're not going to mention too much about client side, but I'm just going to call that out. It's the client side, we've got GlideFlow, which I think is a really awesome name. Well done, ServiceNow. Maybe even a good name for a company, hashtag just saying. But I just want to call out on that one is in order to make your flows, subflows, or actions available to be able to trigger from a script, for example, we have to make them client callable, and that's something specifically you have to do on those individual items. Where have we seen client callable before? Well, answers in comments below. Let's see if you get it. So just focusing really down on the server side here. So with the server-side API, we can access it using the SNFD namespace, FD standing for Flow Designer. If you haven't guessed that yet, there you go. And there's the example, SN_FD.FlowAPI, right? And with the server side, we've got different types of methods. So we've got synchronous methods and asynchronous methods. Synchronous methods is really, I guess we give you an example. We'll hit a button. We'll wait for it to go and do a query, for example, and we'll sit there waiting, watching the screen until it returns. Silly example, but hopefully you get the message. Asynchronous methods is where we might hit a button, it goes off, we don't care. We'll go and make a cup of tea or coffee if you like that thing. And then we come back and it's done, right? So we're not really waiting for it to finish. So synchronous methods using FlowAPI would be a method like execute flow, where we put in the flow name and some inputs, which is an object, and we'll see that in a second. ScriptableFlowRunner looks a bit more complex, right? But the start's still the same. We still use the namespace and the flow API, but we start using getRunner flow, which is where we put the name, and in foreground. So synchronous equals foreground. And I guess they're trying to make this get some similarities between the interface itself, because when you configuring Flow Designer, you've got an option to say whether it's in the foreground or background, right? So perhaps they're trying to do that. Asynchronous methods, if you look at FlowAPI, we've got start flow, so it's kind of similar to the synchronous methods. It's just we change from execute to start. The parameters that you pass in are the same. So it's the name of the flow and the input object. So if we look at the ScriptableFlowRunner asynchronous example, we've got, again, it starts off the same as the synchronous one. We got .flow, but then at the end we've got in background. So synchronous equals foreground, asynchronous equals background. And I just want to point out this, okay? So this is something that I found on the doc sites out there, but it was kind of hidden away, so I just wanted to call this out. So this is a note from the ServiceNow doc site. So it says that this API, and that's FlowAPI, is replaced by the ScriptableFlowRunner. So you may see FlowAPI written somewhere. So if you're debugging someone else's code, so you may see FlowAPI execute flow. And those, from my knowledge, will still continue to work. ServiceNow don't tend to just cut things off. But what we should be doing is using the FlowRunner, getRunner, ScriptableFlowRun going forward. So I just wanted to point that out. You may see FlowAPI, and that'll still work, so you can still use it. But I try and use the ScriptableFlowRunner if you can. And one last thing to mention just before we dive into the tool is I mentioned all this about script. We've been talking about APIs and methods, right? But Flow Designer's low code, no code option, that's where ServiceNow is heading. So why are we talking about scripts? Well, ServiceNow have given us this low code option in Flow Designer, but they've also recognized that some of us, or to extend that functionality, we may need to call that from scripts. Okay, so don't worry if you don't know scripts, but ServiceNow has given us that option. And I just want to point out they've made it very, very easy for those that are kind of on the low code journey, right? So in Flow Designer, you've got a very handy code snippet. They do this and they're really good at this, and I'll show it you, is that you can copy the code and almost do copy and paste, right? So, and by the way, we don't, as devs, we don't copy and paste ever, right? So don't tell anyone. That, by the way, that is a lie. A lot of us copy and paste, you know. Gone are the days where you write from scratch, but don't tell anyone. So we can copy the code snippets. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that the code snippets are only really available when we've got a published thing, so a published flow, subflow, or action. If you've got it in draft and you're still working on it, you're not going to be able to get the code snippet. So publish it first, then get the code snippet. Okay, let's get into the tool and let's have a poke around and see what this thing does. Alrighty, so let's just explain what we're going to do in this demo and what's the outcome we're expecting. So this is a San Diego instance, and this is incident management. Of course, if you haven't guessed, I've got the incident at the top. So for this, what I've done is I've created a few new fields. I've put in color, where we have the options of red, amber, and brown. Brown being our highest alert color. We've got emergency contact number. So this is just a string field. And I've added in this top right here, see, trigger the flow. So that's a UI action. So what we're going to do is when we complete this or enter information into this incident, we save it, we're going to hit the trigger the flow. We're going to put our script inside the UI action from the code snippet, which is going to trigger our subflow, and it's quite simply going to send an email. Okay, so simply put it, when we hit the UI action, it's going to call our subflow. Email's going to be sent out to the caller with some information that we pass in. So we're going to pass in things such as color, emergency contact number, and caller. Really, really simple. Okay. So let's dive over to the flow and have a look at that. Okay. And we go into Subflow. Elevator music. No, we didn't need it that time. So let me just walk you through the subflow. Again, really simple. I've done some other Flow Designer videos which show you a bit more in depth on how to create flows and certain actions and so on and so forth. So this one, we're going to use a subflow. We're going to take in some inputs. We're going to take in input of color, emergency contact number, the table name, unique ID, which will be the sysID, the recipient, so who we're going to send it to. We've also got, we're going to define an output. So what's the result? What's the output of this flow running? Then what we're going to do, and let me just step you through it. We're going to look up that record using the table name and the sysID. And then we're going to send an email. Okay. And what we're going to send that email, information we're going to send in that email is coming from the input. So for example, we've got the color up there. Look, color. We're going to put that in here. This is a code. So if we selected brown, this is a code brown, right? And we're going to send it to the recipient that we send into the inputs. So the recipient, well, we'll use the caller's email address. Yeah, that would make more sense. Coming down, we've got please contact emergency contact number. Again, this is passed in from the inputs. Now, we're using the send email action on this flow. I've also done another video, annoying link should be at the top left. Now, I've also done another video of different ways you can send an email for a flow. And if you've watched that, you'll know this isn't my preferred method, but I'm going to use it because it's all on one screen. It stops me flip-flopping about, and hopefully it all makes sense. So when we've sent that email, we've got a very simple if statement to say, if the email has sent, then assign a value to the output. So we've declared our output at the top, result here, and we're assigning a value to it. and that's I can tell you now, that's going to say success if it's sent. If it's not, it's going to say failure. Okay, so send in a bunch of inputs, look up for the task record that we triggered it from, send an email, whether it's successful or not. We're going to get an output, and then we can do something with that output. Okay, so we'll do that. And so that's the flow. So the next thing we want to do, because I've only partially set this up, I've set up some fields on the incident form that we're going to use, and I've set up this flow. So what we need to do is we go across to the top right, these three icons here, and we're going to get the code snippet. But if you were listening to the first bit, if you were still awake, you will know that we have to publish it. You see, we've got create code snippet. You'll know we need to publish it in order to get that code snippet. So let's do that. Elevator music, this is when we need it. Okay, now it's published. We can go back in here, and now we've got access to the create code snippet. So if we click that, this should give us a really handy, and it does give us a really handy code snippet. Now, if you look at the top here, you've got server and client-side options. I'm going to do another video on client-side. Let's not talk about it. But if we've got server-side, we've got options here. Yeah, so let's just take a minute just to have a quick look at this. So here we can see our input. So this is an object, an inputs object, and we can pass attributes into that object. So color, emergency contact number, sorry. And these are equal to our inputs. You can see them on the left-hand side here, look. And then we've got options here, and it's really ServiceNow are good at doing this. So what they've done is they've given us code that if we want to run it asynchronously, we would uncomment this and run that. If we want to run it synchronously, we would just use what's on screen and thus uncomment that. And as you can see, this is what we mentioned previously. We've got in background, in foreground. The only difference really being is we've now got with inputs, and we're passing in inputs into this. Okay. And then we've got the outputs, so we get the outputs here, okay, and then it's given us a nice try and catch as well, and it's put it in all inside a self-invoking function as well. So what we can do now is we copy that, copy code to the clipboard, copied, and we're going to go back over to the incident, and we're going to go to our UI action. So let's do that. So if we go to UI actions, elevator music as well. ServiceNow. I think you need to sort out the speed of these PDI instances, if anyone's listening. Trigger the flow. This is the UI action I've created. And at the minute, it does nothing other than update the record. So now what we can do is we can add in the script that we just stole. Okay, so let's make that bigger. Okay. Now we're here, let's just digest what we've copied. Okay, so we're in our UI action, we've copied the script, let's just digest what this is. So they've given us a nice try catch block, so try, and this is the block here. So what we'll do, we're just gonna space down on those. Because really this is the bit in here that we're interested in. So up here, what we've done is we're creating an object and calling it inputs. We've got various or a number of attributes that are created within that object, and these are equal to the inputs on the flow or the subflow itself. But at the minute, they haven't been assigned a value, so we're going to need to do that. So let's just go ahead and do that now. So if we start with get unique sysid or get unique ID, we know this is a sysid, so we can do this. Current get unique value. Okay, that'll get us the sysid. And likewise for the table name, we can do current.get table name. Okay, so now we've got the table name and the unique ID, which is sysid. We can go ahead and get the color. So current.get value. And that will be, if we go to our incident, it'll be the name of u_color. So I'm just going to copy this. I always copy just in case I'm in a rush and I spell something incorrectly. So we've declared our color attribute equal to the value of color on the incident form. Remember, current in this case is the incident. And then what else we got to put in? Recipient. So what we could do is, and this is a string, so recipient, this is actually the email address, right? Remember in that flow, we are going to send that. If we go back to our flow here, and we go to the email. So yeah, recipient, right? Okay, so that's an email address. Now we know that, right? So we can go current.caller ID.email. That would work. We'll just do that. Make it simple. Let's just go and check it is caller ID. It is caller_ID. Yes, caller_ID.email. Okay, there's different ways I can access that. We can get the reference record and get email. We can do all that, but let's keep it simple. Okay, so we've now got, oh no, emergency contact number. So let's add that in. So I'm just gonna copy that, and then I'm gonna go to emergency contact number, and I'm just gonna put that there. So now we've got, what have we got? Color, contact number, table, name, unique ID, which is sysid, and recipient. So now we've got a choice here. So in our code snippet, we've got options, and I've said this before, we can run it asynchronously or synchronously. Asynchronously, we hit the button, the form returns, and we get on with our lives. Synchronously means it's going to run, and then we're going to wait for that to come back. And it gives you a bit of a clue here. Look, if we look on line 22, is that we can only get the output of that flow or subflow if we run this synchronously, because we're waiting for the answer to come back. What's the output of the subflow? Well, do you remember here when we declared at the top, we said our outputs is going to be result, and then after we've sent the email, we're going to assign a value to that output, so whether it's successful or not, and that will be what will be in the result. So at the minute, that's just a variable, so result equals the output, but why not? We can add that to the work notes. We could do. Should we do that? Let's do it. So we could add current dot work notes equals result. We can do that. Keep it really simple. We can actually be better than that. So we could actually say, if we get a result, then do something. Okay, so if we actually get a result, then we send something back. So we've got result is already defined, yeah, because it's down here. So we can call it something else if we like. We'll call it answer. Okay, and we'll call it answer and make it equal. So we could have left that as a result, but as it's already been defined, I thought I'd just change it. Why not? And that's okay to do. Instead of calling it answer, I could have called it, I don't know, Bob if I wanted to. As long, the next developer wouldn't have liked me if I did. But I could call it anything as long as you make sure to change the variable name in the other places as well. So I changed the variable to answer there, and I've also changed it here and here as well, so it makes more sense. And the final thing to do is to do a current update. So if we copy that, which is what we had there before, we can do current.update, and then I'll just align them all. I have to do that. I'm quite picky about that, just aligning all the code so it looks all nice on the screen. Okay, so what we've got there, we've added values to our predefined input attributes. We've chosen to go synchronous. So we've got all the script there, and in fact, let's take a look at that quickly. Again, this is something we mentioned before. We've got the namespace SNFD, FlowAPI, getRunner, subflow. Before that was flow, but this is subflow. This is the name, including the scope at the front, global scope look. Then we've got the name of the subflow, running in foreground with inputs. So we're sending inputs, and then the last method is run. So we're going to run. There is a documentation or ServiceNow doc with what all these methods are, what they mean, how do you use them. I'll put a link in the description, really useful. But at the minute, let's keep it simple. They've given us the code snippet. Let's run it and see what happens. Okay, so we've got we're calling out our subflow there. We're injecting some inputs into it, and we're getting a result back, and we're just going to simply plonk it on in the work notes on the incident form. So let's whiz over to the incident. Let's give this a save. And we'll whiz back over to the incident and we'll give it a shot. All right, so we're back over on the incident. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick a caller that we know has an email address. Abraham Lincoln, why not? We're going to pick a color. We're going to have a code brown, right? This is a color brown. Emergency contact number, it doesn't really matter. 911. Short description, we'll call it test. I'm going to save. Okay, so we've got our incident record. We've got values in there. They're all mandatory. And now we're going to hit trigger the flow. Elevator music. Okay, that's done a current dot update, which has thrown us back into the list. Perhaps we should have done a save actually, but let's go back to the record. And let's scroll down, and here we get our work note success, okay, which was the result of that flow. But I could have just written that in the background. I could have done something sneaky, right? So let's check it actually worked. So let's go back over to Flow Designer, and you remember this is on one of my other videos as well. We can go to the executions. So we go back in executions. We've got here this one. So let's go back over to Flow Designer and check the execution record. So we click on executions. We can pick the execution record itself. I've mentioned this on another video, but this is the actual execution here. So we can see this flow ran. We can see the email was sent. So send email, picked off to Abraham Lincoln. And we can see it came back as true success. There you go. Okay. And then we assigned our output result to success, and that's why it's come up on the work notes. So what we've seen there is, what have we done? Let's just quickly recap. We've looked at the flow that I created. We've copied the code snippet. We've used the UI action. We've copied that code snippet into the UI action. We've assigned some values to the attributes of the input. And we've also, we created some fields on the incident record, which I did beforehand, for the purpose of the demo, and we've hit that UI action and it's triggered the flow. So that's what we've done. So in order to answer our question, when is a flow not a flow? When it's a script. Anyway, thank you for sticking with me. If you've made it this far, I appreciate that. You need a medal. But yeah, thanks for sticking with me. If you haven't yet subscribed, as I said, please consider doing it. It does make a massive difference to the channel. If you have subscribed and you like what you see, please share it with your ServiceNow buddies. Stick it all over LinkedIn. Again, that makes a massive difference. Really appreciate it. Until the next time, guys, happy coding or low coding, as it may seem. See you soon.